Hi Hammers fans. Quick reminder, drop a like, hit subscribe, and leave your comment below. That way, you'll always be the first to catch every update about West Ham United. Let me get straight to the point because there is no reason to soften the impact of the comparison running through every West Ham supporter's mind right now. Birmingham City have just announced a gigantic, modern, ambitious project that shouts to the entire world that they genuinely intend to grow. And it is impossible, absolutely impossible, to look at that and not think about how small West Ham's decision-making has become under the very owners who once ran Birmingham. It feels as though the past has returned to show us, in the bluntest way imaginable, what we have been ignoring for years: a complete lack of imagination, courage, and ambition. And the irony hits even harder because none of this would feel so provocative if it did not directly involve David Sullivan, David Gold, and Karen Brady. The club they left behind, the club where they failed to build anything close to modernization or long-term vision, is now presenting a plan that puts West Ham to shame. And not because West Ham have less money, less support, or a weaker market. It is the opposite. West Ham have everything: London, economic potential, land, identity, heritage, a huge fan base. What they do not have is the ambition that Birmingham City, now under new ownership, are proudly displaying. And this hits supporters in an emotional place. It is not just jealousy over a beautiful modern stadium with a retractable roof and that industrial-inspired architecture filled with chimneys. It is the feeling that the project represents exactly what West Ham could be, but refused to become. And the worst part is that this is not because the club is incapable. It is because the club has no desire. While Birmingham planned an entire complex with housing, leisure, offices, a secondary stadium, training pitches, and a full urban regeneration across 48 acres, West Ham remained trapped in the same tired narrative that nothing can be done, nothing is viable, nothing is worth the effort. The club seems to have settled for mediocrity while the rest of the football world evolves. And this contrast becomes even sharper when someone like Simon Jordan appears and insists that nobody is going to come in and build a new stadium for West Ham. Many people swallow that line as if it were a universal truth. But all it takes is looking at what Birmingham have just announced to see that such a claim falls apart instantly. Yes, someone can appear. And yes, someone can build something huge. The difference is that Birmingham showed the will to do so. West Ham simply do not. And it is impossible to ignore the wider comparison. Birmingham City spent years suffering through decline and instability, changing hands, dropping divisions, living through turbulence. And yet now they are ahead of West Ham in the areas that truly define a club's future. Meanwhile, other teams that once sat far below West Ham in the English football pyramid, Bournemouth, Brighton, Brentford, Sunderland, have all overtaken the club in structure, planning, and modern thinking. At the time West Ham moved into the Olympic Stadium, it would have sounded ridiculous to suggest that so many smaller clubs would surpass us in organization, but they did. And now, with Birmingham joining that list, it feels like another step backwards. The London Stadium was supposed to mark the start of a new era. It was sold as something grand, transformative, even revolutionary. But instead, it became the perfect symbol of what West Ham lack: vision. There has always been space and opportunity to turn the entire area around the stadium into something vibrant, full of life, business, entertainment, and community. Yet nothing happens. There is no bold initiative, no architectural identity, no attempt to give the club a home of its own. The owners seem content with the bare minimum, and the club pays the price for that. And the most frustrating part is knowing that structural projects, stadium developments, training grounds, infrastructure, do not count towards PSR. None of this limits transfer spending. None of this restricts football operations. There is no financial obstacle preventing West Ham from doing exactly what Birmingham are doing. Only a human obstacle: the lack of ambition from those at the top. That is why this moment is so symbolic. It is not just about a flashy video or CGI designs. It is a real example of what ambition looks like in practice. It shows that when a club wants to modernize, wants to grow, wants to imagine something bigger, it finds a way. And if Birmingham, Brighton, Brentford, and Sunderland can do it, why can't West Ham? The answer is painful but obvious, because the people in charge do not want to, because they cannot imagine anything beyond the minimum, because they refuse to dream, and supporters feel that more deeply than anyone. They were promised transformation when leaving Upton Park, promised modernization, promised a new identity and a chance to grow. Instead, they received an empty structure surrounded by nothing, carrying neither soul nor ambition. And now, watching another club, run by the former executives of our own board, build something extraordinary only highlights how much West Ham have wasted over the years. It is impossible not to feel anger, disappointment, and exhaustion. In truth, all of this exposes exactly what West Ham are missing. And what they are missing is not money, not location, not market power. It is something far more fundamental and far more damning: the will to be great. Before we carry on, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. This is really important because it strengthens the Claret and Blue family, making our West Ham bigger and stronger every day. Now we move deeper into the feeling that has been circulating ever since the Birmingham video first appeared on screen. Because once we move past the initial shock and begin to break down each detail of the project, it becomes even clearer that West Ham have simply remained stuck in time. And not stuck in the sense of avoiding trends, stuck in the sense of no longer being able to imagine anything beyond the absolute minimum. While Birmingham embraced their industrial past, turning historical elements into modern architecture, West Ham behave like a club that has given up on dreaming altogether. And that contrast becomes even heavier when we remember our own origins. If there was ever a football club perfectly placed to embrace an industrial past filled with factories, ironworks, and working-class identity, it is West Ham. We were literally Thames Ironworks, born among machinery, metal, smoke, labor, and noise. It is a history packed with powerful visual symbols that could be used to transform the London Stadium into something unique. Instead, the stadium remains a borrowed shell, detached from the heart of the club, a cold Olympic leftover. And all of this is the direct result of lack of ambition from those in charge. Meanwhile, Birmingham are not only embracing their history, they are transforming it into something that connects past and future. The chimneys shown in the video, the brickwork, the industrial aesthetic, everything forms a sense of belonging. It looks like a stadium emerging from the city's own soil. This blend of tradition and modernity is not only visually striking, it symbolizes a club that knows who it is and who it wants to become. West Ham, in contrast, seem to have abandoned that type of imagination long ago, as if identity were optional. And here comes the point that hits even harder: the comparison with several clubs that, not so long ago, would have appeared miles behind West Ham in structure and planning. Brighton built a recruitment model admired throughout Europe. Brentford turned themselves into a reference for data-driven football. Bournemouth, even with their limited size, constructed a £50 million training center that exposes West Ham's lack of investment. Sunderland reinvented themselves with organization and vision. And now Birmingham take a huge leap forward. One by one, these clubs have surpassed West Ham in modern thinking, and this hurts because, on paper, West Ham should be leading this movement. They have the market, the size, the fan base, the London location, and the history. They should be the club actively pushing English football towards new horizons. But that does not happen. And it does not happen for the same reason repeated again and again. The owners do not see the club through the lens of ambition. They act as if growing were unnecessary, as if transformation were optional, as if dreaming were a luxury. All it takes is looking at the 48-acre Birmingham development to understand just how much potential West Ham have wasted. The London Stadium was sold as the beginning of a new era, but it never became anything more than a set of PowerPoint promises. There was no effort to build a vibrant district, no desire to explore commercial potential, no intention to breathe life into the surroundings. And the saddest part is knowing that there is still enough space to create something extraordinary, but only if there is willingness. And this lack of willingness becomes obvious even in basic structural decisions. While modern clubs integrate their stadiums, training grounds, community spaces, and commercial areas, West Ham still operate with 3 different training sites scattered separately. It is almost a metaphor for the club's leadership: disjointed, outdated, and unable to think in a unified way. Birmingham, meanwhile, plan a complex that includes a smaller stadium, training fields, and integrated facilities. A complete ecosystem, the exact opposite of West Ham's fragmented approach. What makes the contrast even sharper is the fact that none of this is restricted by financial rules. Stadium projects, infrastructure, training centers, none of this affects PSR. Nothing stops a club from investing heavily in facilities. The restriction is not economic, it is psychological. It is the absence of ambition. And that becomes painfully clear when Birmingham demonstrate what ambition looks like in practice, while West Ham behave as though they are trapped by imaginary limits. And when the Birmingham video shows the retractable roof, the striking facade, the event-ready design, the integration with the canals and the industrial heritage of the city, it feels like watching an alternate reality, a version of what West Ham could have built if the club had chosen to dream big. It touches the supporters' pride because it embodies the type of progress that should have been natural for West Ham but was never truly pursued. And the most uncomfortable part is this. The people who currently run West Ham are the same people who once ran Birmingham. And seeing the club they used to own produce something far beyond anything they have ever attempted casts a harsh light on them. It shows that the issue was never the size of the club, never the resources, and never the city. The issue was always the leadership. There is another important factor that goes beyond the architecture or scale of the project. Birmingham's development carries a message. They want to grow. They want to elevate the status of the club. They want to give their supporters a future to believe in. That feeling of direction, ambition, and pride is priceless. And West Ham offer none of it. The club does not provide a sense of movement or purpose. Supporters look ahead and see nothing resembling a long-term plan, and the frustration only deepens considering how much the supporters have endured. They were promised modernization, integration, development, and progress when leaving Upton Park. They believed those promises. They waited for transformation, and instead they received an empty stadium surrounded by wasted potential and silence. Birmingham's announcement only makes this reality louder, showing that progress is not only possible, it is happening elsewhere. In the end, this entire comparison becomes a powerful symbol. Watching Birmingham City unveil an ambitious, modern, beautifully designed project is like looking at the reflection of what West Ham should have been. A reflection that tells the truth without filters. West Ham could be great, but they are being dragged down by leadership that do not dream, do not innovate, and do not build. Before we carry on, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. This is really important because it strengthens the Claret and Blue family, making our West Ham bigger and stronger every day. Now it is time to take this reflection to its final point, because the issue is no longer simply comparing projects or imagining what could have been. It is about understanding the deeper meaning of all this for West Ham as an institution, as a football club, and as an emotional home for supporters who have spent years waiting for something that never arrives. When a club like Birmingham City announces a project of this magnitude, they are not merely building walls, stands, and facilities. They are building identity, building purpose, and building a future. And that is precisely where West Ham have been failing for so many years. The most painful part is how clearly this exposes a truth the supporters already knew, but which rarely becomes as undeniable as it is now. The current West Ham owners have lost the ability to think big. This is not exaggeration, not drama, and not pessimism. It is simply the reality staring us in the face. All it takes is to look at every detail of Birmingham's project to see leadership that wants to create something meaningful, something that will define a new era. Meanwhile, West Ham's leadership behaves like a group who consider ambition an inconvenience. And the symbolism grows even stronger when we remember how many times Sullivan and Brady have heard criticism about their lack of vision, planning, and imagination. Whenever those criticisms arise, their response is always the same. Everything is complicated, nothing is simple, the club is doing what it can. But then Birmingham step forward and show that when there is willingness, growth becomes reality. They prove that ambition is not theoretical, it is executable. And that makes West Ham's stagnation even more embarrassing, because it removes their most convenient excuse, the idea that it cannot be done. Supporters feel the emotional weight of this more than anyone else. A West Ham fan is not just someone who attends matches. It is someone who carries Upton Park inside their memory as part of their life story, someone who believed the promises made during the move to the London Stadium, someone who expected progress. Instead, supporters received a structure without soul, surrounded by emptiness and lacking purpose. There was no evolution to match the promise. There was only adaptation and a hollow sense of missed opportunity. And when Birmingham present a complex featuring a main stadium, a smaller stadium, training grounds, sporting areas, housing, leisure spaces, and integrated commercial facilities, it becomes impossible not to imagine what West Ham could have achieved with the vast land available in Stratford. More than that, it becomes impossible not to imagine what West Ham could still achieve today. The land exists. The location is superior. The economic potential is massive. The only missing element is the desire to build something meaningful. That is the central point. Desire. West Ham have been treated for years as a club that gets by, a club that solves things with patches, improvisations, and minimal structure. Meanwhile, modern clubs push forward, plan, study, develop, and execute. They want to grow. They want to stand out. They understand that modern football demands vision and courage. West Ham, under current leadership, take none of those steps. Simon Jordan once insisted that nobody would come in and build a new stadium for West Ham. The argument sounds believable only when looking at a club that shows no interest in progress. But then Birmingham emerge, with fewer supporters, less market influence, and a smaller profile, and prove that it absolutely can be done. Of course it can. The difference is ambition. The difference is leadership. The difference is mentality. And the lack of imagination becomes even more striking when we consider the almost cinematic irony. The former owners of Birmingham have now been overshadowed by the very club they once ran. A club that spent years stuck in mediocrity has risen dramatically in the hands of new leaders with vision. This alone is a symbolic humiliation for West Ham's current owners. It shows that the problem never was the club. It was the people leading it. But the significance goes even further than the architecture or scale. Birmingham's project sends a message. They want to be noticed, they want to compete, they want to give their fans something to believe in. That sense of direction, of an intentional future, is priceless. And West Ham offer none of it. Supporters look into the future and see nothing but continuity of the present, and the frustration intensifies because none of this relates to financial restrictions or PSR limitations. Clubs are allowed to invest as much as they want in infrastructure, stadium improvements, and facilities. These investments do not affect spending limits on transfers. In other words, West Ham could have done all of this. They still could. The problem is not regulation. The problem is a leadership that does not dream, does not plan, and does not build. After everything the supporters have endured, the promises, the expectations, the move from Upton Park, Birmingham's announcement exposes how unnecessary West Ham's stagnation really is. It shows that progress is a choice, not a coincidence. It shows that ambition builds futures, while complacency destroys them. And it shows that West Ham have been held back not by circumstance, but by the very people meant to lead the club forward. And in the end, that is what makes this moment so symbolic. Watching Birmingham City unveil an ambitious, beautifully designed project feels like staring into a mirror that reflects what West Ham should have become. A mirror that does not lie. A mirror that exposes the truth. West Ham could be great, but are being restrained by leadership without vision, courage, or imagination. Meanwhile, the rest of football moves forward, and Birmingham have just demonstrated that in the loudest way possible. So that's all for today, folks. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, leave a comment, share, and of course subscribe to the channel for more. Take care, and I'll see you next time.